keynote speaker is Dale Hansen. Clap if you're familiar, because we know we have people from all over, right? Dale Hansen, for those of you who may not know, and that's like, I don't know where you've been, Dale Hansen is the weeknight sports anchor during the 10 p.m. newscast on WFAA Channel 8 in Dallas, Texas. Okay, in Dallas, Texas. Thank you. He also hosts Dale Hansen's Sports Special on Sundays at 10:35 p.m. He's well known for his acclaimed Unplugged segments, which, point of personal privilege, has caused many a debate between me and my father, so thank you for that. In 1987, Hansen was honored with the George Foster Peabody Award for Distinguished Journalism. That same year, he won the DuPont Columbia Award for his contribution to the investigation of SMU's football program. As a result of the investigation, the NCAA prohibited SMU from fielding a football program in 1987. Hansen is the only on-air broadcaster who has received the Radio Television Digital News Foundation's Lifetime Achievement Award, which he received in 2019. Hansen has been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Ellen DeGeneres Show, and I think even bigger than any of that, he's here today at the CIFS conference. So give Dale Hansen a wonderful round of applause as he comes to the stage.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Would everybody just like to stand up for just a second and stretch for a little bit? If you've been saying, everybody just stand up one time. I want to get everybody comfortable again if we can. Doesn't that feel better, huh? Now sit your ass back down, everybody. I don't have any movie clips, but is Molly still in the room? I swear to this is true. Sunday night, I just watched the movie Molly's Game for the second time. And I walked out, I was listening to tell her story. I said, man, that's incredible. That's just like the movie I watched Sunday night. And it turns out it was her. I mean, can you imagine having a movie made about your life and you're portrayed by Jessica Chastain? There was actually some thought about making a movie about my life, but Wilford Brimley turned it down and Jackie Gleason is dead. So there wasn't any place to go with that at all. It's a pleasure, I guess, to be here at 11 o'clock in the morning. This is a little bit early in the day for me, believe it or not. I do that 10:30 news. I get home. I live in Waxahachie, which is about 60 miles from here, if you don't know. I get home about 11:15 at night. I go to bed about 2:30 in the morning, and then start my day about noon. So if I zone out on you a little bit now, as best I can, at least you understand why. It is somewhat intriguing to me that I have been invited to speak to this particular group. I was told in an email that they're trying to get this organization to pull together as one, to set a standard for greatness, to achieve that greatness with style and class and dignity. And they said, Dale, we think you're just the person to talk about that. And I wrote the young lady back and I said, what the hell do I know about any of that stuff? I cover the Dallas Cowboys for a living. I mean, just seeing who's from Texas here and who's not. One very quick disclaimer before I crawl up at my soapbox, as I tend to do. Those of you who know me, how many of you in here, incidentally, are from North Texas? And, yeah? Oh, really? And the rest of you from around the country, pretty much? Yeah? Okay. Well, if you don't know, and those of you in Texas I'm sure do, I've made a rather successful living for myself by bagging on Cowboys owner Jerry Jones. I get a lot of compliments for this. I get a lot of criticism for this, but I would like you to understand this, and you can Google this up and find it to be true. I do make a lot of jokes about Cowboys owner Jerry Jones. I make fun of Cowboys owner Jerry Jones a great deal. I'm constantly pointing out all the stupid things he does, and a lot of people think that I do that because I'm bitter about being fired from the Cowboys radio broadcast several years ago. If you understand nothing else I say today, ladies and gentlemen, I do hope you'll understand this. I don't make fun of Jerry Jones. I don't criticize Jerry Jones. I don't expose the stupidity of Jerry Jones because I'm bitter about being fired from the Cowboys radio broadcast. I make fun of Jerry Jones because I just think he's a goofy son of a bitch, and I'm not afraid to say so. Incidentally, for those of you outside Texas, I do apologize. My mom raised me in Iowa to know that sumbitch is a dirty word. I've lived in Texas 39 years now, and in Texas, you're either a sumbitch or you're fixing to be a sumbitch, you know. And Jerry Jones is a goofy sumbitch. That's all I'm going to say. I was born in a little town in Logan, Iowa. It's a population of about 1,000 people. Actually, I think when I left, the population was 1,342. 1,342 people in my hometown when I was born, 1,342 people in my hometown when I left there, and there's 1,342 people in Logan, Iowa today. I used to call my dad. I said, Dad, how's everything going in Logan, Iowa? He said, Dale, it's not a good day. It's not a good day. Ed Leonard died last night, Dale. I said, oh, my goodness, what are you down to, Dad, 1,341? He goes, no, Charlene Chase had a baby. We're right back where we were, you know. 1,342 people in my hometown, 59 kids in my graduating high school class, the largest graduating class they've ever had. One black family in the entire county, not in the town, one black family in the entire county. And you, ladies and gentlemen, are looking at probably the most crazy-ass social liberal you've ever met in your entire life. And I did not come to this naturally. I wrote this in a commentary a couple of years ago. My dad used the N-word like it was a proper noun. My dad and I would be watching the baseball games on Saturday afternoon, and Bob Gibson and Willie Mays and Elston Howard and Henry Aaron and all the great black athletes were always referred to by the N-word. My dad used that word like it was a proper noun. When I got a little bit older, I asked my dad, because my dad was also known as the biggest defender of the Matthews family. It was Roy and Billy Matthews. And when there was ever a problem in Logan, Iowa, with someone doing whatever to Roy and Billy Matthews, my dad would always intervene because he loved Roy and Billy Matthews. So I said to my dad when I got a little bit older, how is it possible that you only know one black family in your entire life? You only know one family of color in your entire life, and you love those people, and yet everybody else you refer to as the N-word. And my dad actually looked at me and said, oh, hell, Dale, you don't understand. The Matthews are different. The Matthews are different. And as I said on Channel 8 in one of my unplugged commentaries, the ignorance of that argument will twist your mind if you allow it, and it twisted mine. I was never one who used the N-word. I didn't know one way or the other. I just knew what I was taught. I went to the Navy. I was 17 years old, and my whole world started to change. I'm sitting in a bar in Patuxent River, Maryland, and many of my stories today, ladies and gentlemen, will revolve around the fact that I was sitting in a bar. Many of my stories will begin with, I was sitting in a bar. I'm 18 years old in Patuxent River, Maryland, and there's 7 of us jammed into this booth, and some of you might be old enough to remember this, but you remember when the jukebox was in the actual, just a little teeny tiny jukebox in the booth, and you could play your own songs for a dime. And you'd flip the pages and you'd pick the songs, and you had your music playing right there in your jukebox. And there's 7 of us in this booth, and we're getting drunk, and we're doing shooters, and we're slamming beers, and we're flirting with the waitress, and we're asking the girl out for dates, and we're being obnoxious, and we're getting drunk, and we're playing the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and it's just blasting out of this little jukebox. And all of a sudden, these 7 black guys come walking in from the base. They went on to the other side of the bar, which was somewhat standard in 1968. They all sit down and they start slamming their drinks and playing their music and flirting with the waitresses and being obnoxious. And this buddy of mine looks at me, and I'll never forget it. This buddy of mine looks at me and says, "Look at those son of a bitches sitting over there." And I look over and I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Look at them. They're getting drunk. They're playing their music loud as hell. They're flirting with the waitresses. They're being obnoxious." And at the age of 18, I looked at this guy and I said, "You mean just like us?" Now, I'm not saying this is like walking across a bridge in Alabama, but I got up and I walked across the bar. And I walked up, I said, "You guys mind if I join you?" And this young kid looks up and says, "Honky ass, what is it you want with us?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to join you if you don't mind." He goes, "Why do you want to join us?" And I said, "Because I like Sam Cooke and Jackie Wilson and James Brown and Aretha Franklin better." And from that day forward, my world changed. I became known as the man who loves all the black guys. I was always hanging out with the black guys. We're in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and this young kid gets on the bus, and he's drunker than hell, and he's singing. He goes to take a seat in the back of the bus, and he won't shut up. And 4 white guys jump up, and they're going to beat the hell out of him. I'm not a fighter. Never been a fighter. When you're as big as I am, most people are afraid to fight you. And if they're not afraid to fight me, I'm sure as hell afraid to fight them, right? But I see these 4 guys walking back, and they're going to beat the hell out of this kid. And I looked at my buddy Eddie Wilkes, and I said, "We have to stop this." And I jumped up, and I told these guys to go sit their ass down. And now it's 4-on-1, and the guy said exactly that. "You think you can stop us?" And Eddie Wilkes jumped up and he said, "Well, I don't know if he can by himself, but maybe the 2 of us can." And then another guy jumped up. And then, as is typically the case, the 4 white bullies went back to their seat. And I became famous on the USS York County for defending this one young, drunk black kid. We got back from San Juan, Puerto Rico. I invited 6 of these guys over to my house. My wife and I married my high school sweetheart when I was 19 years old. We lived off base in this apartment. I invite these 6 guys back to the apartment. We party all night. We cook hamburgers and hot dogs on the grill. We're having an unbelievably fun night. I take them back to the base, drop them off at the ship. I come back home, and on my sainted mother's grave, I promise you this is true, my wife had thrown out all the silverware, all the plates and glasses. And we didn't have any money. We couldn't afford to go down to the store even if we'd wanted to and buy more. And she had thrown all of the plates and glasses and silverware out. And I looked at her and I said, "What the hell are you doing?" And she looks at me and said, "You don't really expect me to eat off those again, do you?" We were married for 7 years. There wasn't a good day in the entire bunch. It seemed like a good idea when I was 19, but it turned out to be one of the biggest disasters of my life. I tried to be as nice about this as I could, but I wrote this in another commentary on Channel 8 one night, because she died a few years ago from cancer. And when she died, I wrote what I tried to portray as a fair assessment of this woman who was and is indeed the mother of my children. And I told a story of how we had divorced after 7 years of marriage because the woman did not like the man I had become. And I definitely did not like the woman that she still was. Now, I thought that was incredibly nice of me to say. A lot of women didn't see it that way. But I thought it was damn near brilliant. Because in all fairness to her, The man she married, or thought she married, changed almost 180 degrees from we were high school sweethearts. She was the head cheerleader. I was the captain of the basketball team. We were high school sweethearts. We got married right out of high school, like all the kids in my hometown were doing. And 7 years later, she did not like the man that I had become, and I didn't like the woman she still was. So we divorced. And my life has continued to thrive ever since. Once I got rid of that racist son-bitching woman. They wrote an article a few years ago about me in the paper. My granddaughter, as some of you probably know, my granddaughter is black. You see, I've been fortunate enough to win quite a few awards for the things I write. I have been written about in the New York Times as this woke, older white guy from Texas. My granddaughter loves it when I refer to myself as woke. The Washington Post wrote about me, and I was indeed on the Ellen DeGeneres show, all because of the outlook that I've had on life since I was 18 years old. And my granddaughter is black. I win these awards, and I get a very nice check because of what I write. But I don't write for the check, and I don't write for the awards. I write for my granddaughter. I want my granddaughter to live in a better world than her grandfather grew up in. I want my granddaughter to live in the world that I dreamed was possible when I was a teenage boy in Logan, Iowa, coming out of high school and joining the Navy. I was arrogant enough to believe that when I was this 18-year-old boy in the Navy and realized what the real world was actually like, I was arrogant enough to believe that my generation was smarter than all who had come before, and my generation would stop the wars that were killing people in a country that most people can't find on a map for a reason we do not understand. My generation would convince the leaders of the world to quit trying to settle their differences with bullets and bombs, but to sit down and discuss their issues over a table, and we would no longer send young men and women to die in a foreign country that you cannot find on a map, because my generation was smarter than that. My generation knew that we would stop the discrimination against people of color, because my generation knew the ignorance of that. My generation knew that we would stop the discrimination against a person because of the religion they follow, or the fact that they might follow no religion at all, because my generation knew how idiotic and wasteful that argument was. And my generation knew that the richest country in the world would never send a child to bed hungry and allow someone to sleep on a street without a roof over their head, because my generation knew that the richest country in the world could take care of all their people. I believed that when I was 18 years old, serving in the Navy in Patuxent River, Maryland. I marched for that. I argued with everybody about that, and I believed it in my soul. And one of the hardest things about being 70 years old today is the realization that my generation has failed. My generation has failed my granddaughter. We still send young men and women to die in a country that most of you cannot find on a map, and we send them to die there for a reason that most of us do not understand. We still discriminate against people in our country based on the color of their skin or the religion they choose. And we still have kids going to bed hungry at night and sleeping on our streets because the richest country in the world hasn't figured out a way to take care of all of our people. And my generation has failed. I said this in a commentary the other day on Channel 8. Have you ever stopped to consider what the human race could have done on this planet if we didn't spend so much money to defend our little piece of it? Have you ever stopped to consider what the human race could have done on this planet if we didn't spend so much money to defend our little piece of it. It's disgusting to me. It's sickening to me. Bobby Kennedy once said, "Some men see things that they are and ask why. I dream things that never were and ask why not." I try to live my life by that. Some men see things as they are and ask why. I dream things that never were and ask why not. I want that granddaughter of mine, when she was 10 years old, to forget about the day she went into a department store with my credit card to buy all of her school clothes. And when my white daughter and her 10-year-old black daughter walked into the store, the security guard immediately started following them around. And when my granddaughter was picking out all the expensive tennis shoes and all the expensive clothes, and by the way, could somebody explain to me, how the hell did it become a fashion statement that you buy a pair of blue jeans and there's holes in the front and there's holes in the back? Look at these, Papa. Look at these, Papa. My ass hangs out the back. My knees hang out. Look at these, Papa. I got it for $89. Hell, I threw away 35 pairs of those. When my ass came out the back of my pants went out the back of my house. I digress. True story. My granddaughter goes into this department store with a security guard following her, and she wants the nicest tennis shoes and the nicest clothes. And the clerk actually looked at her and my daughter and said, "No, no, no, no. This is much too expensive. Much too expensive. Let me show you this. You might like this." And they sell her some decent clothes. They get to the counter, and there's a picture of me there, because I was involved in a fundraising campaign for a charity in Dallas, and there's a picture of me asking people to drop their change in the jar or some such thing. And my 10-year-old granddaughter looks at my picture, and she goes, "Hey, Mama, look, it's Papa. It's Papa." And the clerk looks up and says, yeah, I'm sure it is. And my daughter looks at the clerk and said, "No, that's my dad. This is his granddaughter." And then hands him my credit card with my name and a note attached, and if you have any questions, call me at this number. And the clerk took all the clothes and slid them off to the side and said, "Let me show you some of our better stuff." And my daughter looks at her and said, "Oh, we were going to buy the better stuff, but we're happy with what we bought now." My granddaughter went to Louisville High School. There was a story a couple of years ago you might remember where a bunch of white kids stood up at a basketball game chanting, "Who's your daddy? Do you know your daddy? We know ours." And holding up white power signs. Had two separate cardboard signs, and it said white power. As they chanted, "Who's your daddy? Do you know your daddy? We know ours." And the parents and the school officials, when I wrote about that, wanted to run me out of town because their argument was there were only a few kids actually chanting that. And the sign that they held up, white power, was just an honest mistake. They had all these different signs on the floor, and they just reached down and grabbed a couple of signs, and somehow they just accidentally said white power. I called that granddaughter of mine and I said, "Did this happen a lot?" And she said, "Poppy, it happened at every game. It happened at every game we played in Frisco. They would chant these racist chants to us. And there was usually a fight in the parking lot of every game because racism is alive and well in America. It is absolutely alive and well in America." My life also took another professional turn. 6 years ago, some of you might be aware of this, but Michael Sam, the University of Missouri football player, who's gay, the Southeastern Conference Defensive Player of the Year, the best defensive player in the best football conference in America, and then he announces that he is gay. And the whole country just went nuts. This is an absolutely true story as to how this happened. My producer comes to me on a Sunday night, and he goes, "We don't have a reporter working tomorrow. I'm hoping that you could write a commentary to fill the time." And I looked at Sean Hamilton, and I said, "What is it I would write about?" He goes, "Well, I think there's two things. One, Michael Sam, the gay football player from the University of Missouri, or you could write about Marcus Smart, the kid from Flower Mound, he played basketball at Oklahoma State, who pushed a fan in the stands when this fan called him the N-word. And Marcus pushed him, and it became a big issue." And I said, "Well, yeah, I've written about the racism of basketball fans. I've kind of tapped out on that." He goes, "Good, because I would prefer you write something about Michael Sam." And I said, "Well, what is it I would write?" He said, "Well, I don't know, but I'm sure you'll figure it out." So I'm driving home trying to think, what is it I would say here? How would I present this argument? As I'm driving home, some of the most ignorant commentary was on the radio. Whether it was the radio announcers themselves or the players that they were interviewing. It was absolutely obnoxious to me. I mean, Patrick Creighton was a former wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys who dropped the pass in the playoff game that would have sent them to the Super Bowl, but I digress. Said that he would not be comfortable with a gay man in the locker room. He would not be comfortable taking a shower with a gay man in the shower. He would not be comfortable. And then it hit me. This is exactly what they said about Jackie Robinson when he entered Major League Baseball in 1947. They would not be comfortable dressing next to a black man. They would not be comfortable taking a shower with a black man. And now, since we realized the stupidity of that, we've transferred our hate to gays. So I write this commentary. My favorite guy, one of our camera operators, pokes his head around the camera and said, "What do you think?" I said, "Oh, I don't know. I'll probably get 100 emails. 50 of them will like it, 50 of them will hate it," which is usually the case if I do my job well. I then get a call from my best friend, my friend Judge Eric Moyer, a man of color, Harvard graduate, a judge in Dallas County. And I said, "What do you think of the commentary?" He said, "Well, I think it's fine." Fine? Hell, I thought it was a lot better than fine, you know. So I get a call from another friend of mine. I said, What do you think of the commentary?" He goes, "Oh, I think it'll work. I think it'll work. It'll work." You know. I get another call. "Dale, that was really okay." I swear to you this is true. The three people that I respect most tell me that it's fine, it'll work, and it's okay. So I'm thinking that's exactly what it is. So as I said to Billy Sons, I'll probably get 100 emails over the next couple of weeks. 50 of them will like it. 50 of them. I get home, I've got 118 emails. In my 35-minute drive from downtown Dallas to Waxahachie, I've got 118 emails. I get up the next morning, I've got 600 emails. I get to work that afternoon, I've got over 1,000 emails. Thank you, sir. I've got over 1,000 emails. Now, these emails are coming in from all over the country. I mean, I'm getting emails from Canada, California, Boston, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Nebraska, Idaho. I mean, I'm getting emails from, and then all of a sudden, I get an email from Australia. And I'm thinking, I swear to God, I'm thinking, because I did not know, how big of an antenna do these sumbitches have? I mean, they're watching me in London, England. They're watching me in Toronto. They're watching me in Brisbane, Australia. How big of an antenna do they have? And one of our anchors, Shelley Slater, looks at me and she said, "You don't know what's happened here, do you?" I said, "No, what do you mean what happened?" She said, "Dale, you've gone viral. You've gone viral." And I looked at her and I said, Hell, I feel fine. I didn't know. A couple of days later, Ellen DeGeneres' staff calls, invites me to fly to LA and be on the Ellen DeGeneres show. The lovely Mrs. Hansen goes with me, which I believe makes me husband of the decade. My wife got a trip to LA to meet Ellen DeGeneres and Kevin Costner, who was on right after me. Ellen DeGeneres put me on first and then goes, now we'll talk to Kevin Costner, which I think is about right. You know? My whole world changed. Because as I said, at several banquets I've done over the last couple of years, I've had gay men, and gay women for that matter, but I've had gay men working in my office, in my building, for more than 40 years. For more than 40 years, I've had gay men working in my building. I've had gay men working in my office. I've had gay men working in my department. And the argument that you can't have a gay man in your office because he'll hit on you, he'll be staring at you, he'll be flirting with you, is just crap. Because as I said, I've had gay men working in my department for more than 40 years, and not one time has one of those guys ever hit on me. And I'm starting to get a little bit pissed off about it. Now, I'm not saying today. I mean, I can see. I mean, I've got mirrors in my house. I'm not saying today. I know what I look like today. But in my day, every gay man in America would have been chasing my sweet ass all over Dallas. But they just don't. It's the stupidest thing ever. We were the first station in Dallas to hire a female sportscaster, Andrea Joyce, who ended up going to CBS and then never talks to me again because she big times me now. But we've had 4 different women over the years, because we're trying to buck the trend of a corporate America that thinks diversity of old white men is hiring younger white men. There are too many people in our country, especially the old white men, who think that diversity means hiring younger white men. My station has always broken that mold. We hired our first black reporter, sports reporter, several years ago, and we were going to do a story, and this is just how it benefits my business, how diversity benefits every business. The talk shows were becoming a big raging battle in Dallas. Brad Sham had owned it all. And then all of a sudden, here comes Randy Galloway and Norm Hitzges and these different people. And we're going to do a story about the battle of the talk show host. And I looked at Chris Arnold, and I said, I want you to talk to all 3 of them. And Chris Arnold looked at me and said, all 3? You mean all 4? I said, no, I want you to talk to Norm, I want you to talk to Brad, I want you to talk to Randy Galloway. He said, what about Roger B. Brown? Roger B. Brown was on a black radio station, had a huge following. Hell, I didn't know it. My producer didn't know it. My other white reporter didn't know it. Chris Arnold knew it. So we went out, we did a story, and we interviewed all 4 of them. And the response blew up. People from the black community were calling and writing like, oh my God, Dale, thank you. You finally shined a light on our lives. You finally shared our perspective. When in reality, I didn't do anything. I just got lucky by hiring the right person at the right time. See, this is the other side of the business that I know I believe in. I would think and hope that most of you do as well. If you hire good people, if you allow those people to do good work, if you empower them to make good decisions, you will be shocked at how many honors and awards and recognition and dollars will flow to you. Most people who know me now will tell you that I get paid a ridiculous amount of money to sit on the air every night and go, here's Joe Trahan. Here's Mike Leslie. For 30 years, I said, here's George Reba. I give good people an opportunity to do good work, making good decisions, and damn near all the recognition and honors and awards comes to me. This is the nature of the beast. And when you expand your horizons, you have the potential for growth that most people for decades did not understand. My first job was a bill collector at Dial Finance in Omaha, Nebraska. So I know everything there is to know about the financial industry. I was a bill collector in August of 1969. I got out of the Navy in July of 69. I get hired at Dial Finance. And the man I worked for was just a racist monster. I won't mention Stephen Veach by name, but after the Civil Rights Act had passed, we were no longer allowed to ask the color or the nationality or whatever the hell you call it of a person's personality or style. What the hell do you call it? You can no longer say, are you black? So, and again, I don't want to mention his name, but Stephen Veach said, I want you to put an X on the corner of the application if it's a person of color. And I refused to do it. So my job primarily was a bill collector, but I also processed loans and checked out credit ratings and the like, because as I said, I know everything there is to know about the financial industry. And I had this young man who was an engineering student at the University of Nebraska in Omaha, Nebraska. Now, this has only been 50 years. In 2 months, this will be 50 years ago. So I'm bound to forget this one of these days. But I flipped him into a bigger loan because he couldn't borrow money from the banks. There were no programs to help him pay for his college. So he was an engineering student, straight A's. He was working 2 different part-time jobs to pay his bills, and he had never missed a payment in the previous 3 years that we had been loaning him money. And we kept, because of typical college debt, we just kept increasing the amount of money, and the interest rates kept going higher and higher. So anyway, he calls and he needs more money. I do all my homework. I turn it in. And Stephen Veach looks at it and said, this is a hell of a job. This is a hell of a job. This is a great young man. And Dale, this is why we do this. We can help young people who don't have the ability to borrow money from a bank. So they need us, Dale. This is why we're here. He said, great work. And then the kid showed up to pick up his money, and Stephen Veach runs up to me and said, you didn't tell me he was a N-word. He said, you didn't put an X on the application. I said, oh, I'm sure I did. Oh, I guess I forgot. Well, we're not loaning that much money to that son of a bitch. And I said, Stephen, everything about this young man checks out. He hasn't missed a payment in 3 years. The only thing that bothers you is the color of his skin. And Stephen Veach walked up and told the young man there had been a mistake and he could not get his money. It's been 50 years in 2 months. I'll never forget the look on his face when he walked out the door and he looked back at me. My only real regret is that I didn't know enough to call the TV stations or the newspapers to expose the blatant racism of Dial Finance and Stephen Veach in particular. So I quit. My dad went nuts. My mom started to cry. My lovely, supportive wife. You quit over it. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. The best thing I ever did. Maybe the proudest moment I have in my life. I'm arrogant enough and cocky enough to tell you that I'm proud of a lot of things that I've been able to achieve in my life. Having never gone to college, as I wrote in another recent commentary on Channel 8, if they ever do a poster about white privilege in America, they should put my picture next there. If there's ever a poster about white privilege in America, they should put my face on that poster. Think about this, ladies and gentlemen. I have had 11 jobs in my professional life. And again, I promise you this is true. I've had 11 jobs in my professional life. 4 of them before I got into broadcasting, and 7 jobs in broadcasting from different radio and TV stations. I never went to college. I'm the only person in Dallas-Fort Worth television without a college degree. I never went to college because, as I mentioned earlier, I went straight to the Navy right out of high school. I've had 11 jobs in my life, and I have been fired from 8 of them. I quit Dial Finance, the first one. I got a job as an employment agency counselor. I got fired on my 4th day there. It was St. Patrick's Day, and if you know anything about St. Patrick's Day in Omaha, when you go to lunch, you're not coming back. Who the hell goes back? So they fired me. I got a job as a food salesman at Guaranteed Foods in Omaha, Nebraska. They fired me. I then got a job as a bill collector at University of Nebraska, Omaha, and they fired me. I got a job at KCOB in Newton, Iowa. They tried to fire me a couple of times, but I survived. I get my first broadcasting job. I mean, think about this. I'm in Newton, Iowa, and the first thing they have me do is the farm market report. Any of you in here familiar with the farm market reports? They had me reading something called hog futures. And I said on the air, this is stupid. Hogs don't have a future. Bacon and sausage is breakfast. It's not a future. They wanted to fire me, but I survived. I finally ended up quitting that job. I went to KNI in Knoxville, Iowa. Nobody in here from Iowa, are you by chance? Yeah? Oh, you are? Really? Are you familiar with Knoxville, Iowa? Yeah? Am I right about this? If God ever decides to give the world an enema, he's going to put the tube in Knoxville, Iowa. So they fired me in Knoxville, Iowa. I went to St. Cloud, Minnesota. Anybody in here from Minnesota by chance? Nobody? Yeah. How the hell does anybody in Minnesota ever get married? It is the coldest state on the planet. My wife and I had separated by this point. I'm single, or at least I think I'm close enough to being single. I go to Minnesota, every woman in the state looks like they weigh 600 pounds. I mean, what do you say to a woman in Minnesota? I love the way your parka fur matches your mittens. I mean, your galoshes look so cool. I mean, what the hell? So I'm telling my buddy, how can I meet a woman? They all look like they weigh 600 pounds. He goes, Dale, it's the parka. It's the parka. I meet this woman at a bar. I take her back to my apartment for a nightcap. She takes off the parka. She weighed 600 pounds. So they fired me in St. Cloud, Minnesota. I go to Coil Radio in Omaha, Nebraska. I get fired again. I go to KMTV Television, my first job. My first TV job. Now, keep in mind here, never been to college. I'm a news reporter. I've actually won several awards by that time for my news reporting. And Mark Gutierrez looks at me. I swear to you, this is a true story. Mark Gutierrez looks at me and said, where'd you go to school? I said, Logan, Iowa. He said, no, I mean, where'd you get your college degree? I said, I never went to college. He goes, oh my God, you can't be a news reporter here without a college degree. I said, but Mark, I've won all these awards. I mean, you've heard about my work at Coil Radio. I mean, that's why you've allowed me to come in for the interview. He said, Dale, I can't do it. As I'm sitting there, his phone rings, and Dave Weber, the weekend sportscaster, quit. And he looks at me, and he goes, hey, kid, you like sports? Hell, I love sports. I just wanted a job. He said, how would you like to be the weekend sportscaster? And I said, well, I'd love to, but I said, I never went to college. I mean, I thought you said everybody who works here has to have a college degree. He goes, not to be a sportscaster, you don't. He said, you don't need any education at all for that job. True story. And I got hired. 3 years later, I get fired. I come to Channel 4 in Dallas, Texas. 3 years later, I get fired. And I've been at Channel 8 for 36 years now. Because while it took me a while to grow up, I think my priorities were always in the right place. I believe in people. I support people around me. I wasn't always this way. In Omaha, Nebraska, I did everything by myself. I edited my own highlights. I wrote my scripts. I picked the sound bites that I wanted. I did everything by myself. I told every reporter what story they were going to cover and how I wanted that story covered. I did the exact same thing at Channel 4 in Dallas, Texas. I edited my own highlights. I picked my own sound bites. I told my reporters what story I wanted them to cover and how I wanted them to cover it. And then a light bulb went off in 1983 because I was surrounded by great people at Channel 8. More importantly, I was surrounded by a management team that I finally could respect. This was far and away the biggest problem that I had my entire younger life. I do not tolerate fools easily. I cannot stand the ignorance of management when they are unwilling to listen, when they are unwilling to discuss the issue. And I finally found a manager in the great Dave Lane, the greatest general manager I've ever had the honor and pleasure to work for in my life. And he said to me, why do you have so many problems at every place you've been? We think you're a remarkable talent on air. You have a gift about telling stories that makes people react well. Why do you get fired all the time? And I said, because I've worked for a lot of stupid managers. And Dave Lane, without blinking, looks at me and says, what was the problem? I said, Dave, they would never allow me to express my point of view. That's all I want. So I believe this, ladies and gentlemen. If I can't convince my general manager that I'm wrong, or that he's wrong, rather, if I can't convince my general manager that he's wrong, then I'm wrong. I'm arrogant enough and cocky enough and egotistical, apparently, enough to tell you that I can make the argument. And if I can't convince you of my argument, then my argument is flawed. And part of this belief comes from this. Name me another sportscaster in America who was fired from 8 of his previous 10 jobs, never went to college, and gets hired at WFAA in Dallas, considered to be one of the top 3 or 4 local TV stations in America. Yes, that's probably incredibly arrogant for me to say so. But my own sister, who quite frankly thinks Fox News is a little bit too liberal. We think my dad dropped her on her head when she was a baby and she never fully recovered. My own sister called me and said, how can you possibly say that white privilege was a factor in your life? She goes, Dale, I've always been proud of you. I thought you achieved all this on your own hard work. I said, I think I've worked very hard. But do you think there's a person in America, a person of color, who could do what I've done? And it's not about my talent. It's not about my skills. It's not about my work ethic. It's about the opportunity that I was given. I've only interviewed for 12 jobs in my entire life, face to face. And I was offered all 12. Now, when I got fired at Omaha, Nebraska, I sent out 111 resumes and tapes. And 110 stations turned me down. Based on my resume, based on my tape, 111 of the 112 stations that I applied to turned me down. And there's not a one of them who can afford me now. Because once I got face to face in Dallas, Texas, I was hired. When I got fired in Dallas, Texas, I got a face-to-face meeting with Dave Lane and the great Marty Haig, and I was hired again. And I've had, when people talk about the difficulty of working with a Dale Hansen, I've had Arnold Payne as my chief photographer for 36 years. My executive assistant, Jose Gant, has been with me for 36 years. George Reba was with me for 32 years before he retired. Sean Hamilton, my sports director now, and my executive producer, has been with me for 19 years. Joe Trahan has been with me for 18 years. Because I run a diverse shop, I run an inclusive shop, and everybody plays in my game. We hired a young man from Buffalo just recently, a guy named Jonah Javad. And he says to me, which was one of the most incredibly flattering things I've ever heard, he said, Dale, I came from Buffalo, not to come to Dallas necessarily, but to have the opportunity to work with you. Because I know you are going to give me an opportunity to shine. He did a story the other night that ran 2 minutes and 2 seconds long. As a standard argument in my business, every story should be like 90 seconds. I mean, if Jesus came back, they would cover it in 90 seconds. This kid writes 1:50, 2 minutes. They're just tremendous stories. I mean, they are tear-jerking, they are heartwarming, they're funny, they're informative. He's just a gifted reporter. And I looked at him, I said, name me another sports anchor in America who would take a 3.5-minute sportscast and give you 2 minutes of it. And he looked at me and said, Dale, that's why I'm here. I include everybody in the process. And what I learn and what they teach me has made me successful, has won me awards, has filled my bank account, because I take in everybody. Leave you with a final thought, if I may. I don't understand why everybody doesn't see life the way I do. Yeah. I mean, it's a childish argument, but it's true. Kids don't hate. 3, 4, and 5-year-old kids don't hate. You go to any playground in America, and there's a black kid, a Muslim kid, a Catholic kid, a Jewish kid, 2 white kids. They're just rolling around in that sandbox. Now, they might be arguing about who's got the ball or where the marble, but they don't hate. We teach them to hate. We teach kids to hate. And I don't understand why. This very city you're in right now, this very city of Irving, Texas, used to have a mayor who wanted basically to ban Muslims in America. She was so anti-Muslim, it was disgusting. And every time I hear, say, someone in power suggest that we should ban Muslims from our country, I always ask the one question: can Kareem Abdul-Jabbar stay? I like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I think he's a funny, personable guy who was a hell of a basketball player. There was a nut on Fox 2 weeks ago. Now, granted, a nut on Fox is redundant, but there was a nut on Fox who made the comment, not all Muslims are terrorists, but all terrorists are Muslim. Really? Really? Not all Muslims are terrorists, but all terrorists are Muslim. 2 words. Timothy McVeigh. Timothy McVeigh blew up the federal building in Oklahoma City, killed more than 200 innocent men, women, and children. David Gold was a radio host on KLIF in Dallas. And when that bomb went off, for about an hour and a half, he knew that it was a Muslim attack. He knew that the Muslims had finally come to America to attack us in our homes. And when we found out that it was a former soldier, a 28-year-old white guy with a flat top, nobody said, holy God, what are we going to do about those former military guys who have short hair and believe in God? What are we going to do about those people? Not one person, not one single person. Every time there's a mass shooting, every time a Timothy McVeigh blows up a building, not one time do they blame white America. But 19 Muslims fly into the Twin Towers in the Pentagon, 15 of them from Saudi Arabia, and we attack Iraq. 19 crazy terrorists who happen to be Muslim fly into the Twin Towers, 15 of them from Saudi Arabia, and we attack Iraq. What the hell's wrong with us? What the hell is wrong with us? Kids don't hate. We teach hate. I quoted Bobby Kennedy a moment ago. And for those of you not from Texas, this is true. I used that quote on an Unplugged one time. And it was about cheating in college sports in Texas, and I used the Bobby Kennedy quote. And I said, my problem is I'm one of those crazy liberals from the 60s who believes in what Bobby Kennedy used to say. John McKay was our anchor at the time. He said, Dale, you can't say that. You can't say that on Channel 8. I walked in the office, and Dave Lane, that great general manager, wadded up my script and threw it at me. He said, did you say this on our air? And in that same commentary, I had called Texas A&M football coach Jackie Sherrill a disgusting human being. And he wads up my script and he throws it at me. I said, well, yeah, I said that. And he goes, what the hell were you thinking? And I said, well, I think Jackie Sherrill's a disgusting human being. He said, no, Dale, you proved that. I agree with that. But did you tell people that you're a liberal and quote that damn Bobby Kennedy on our air? You know? I said, yeah, I did. He goes, well, I don't like that. So, but I will leave you with a quote that I live my life by every day. And I don't know why you don't. Bobby's younger brother, Ted Kennedy, said, we know the future will outlast all of us, but we live on in the future we make. That's who I am, ladies and gentlemen. That's who I try to be every day. That's who I want my granddaughter to tell her friends about when I'm dead and gone. And I am arrogant enough to believe that she will. Because I know for a fact, as Ted Kennedy said, we know the future will outlast all of us, but we live on in the future we make. And if we make that future as diverse as it should be, as inclusive as it should be, as diverse as it can be, as inclusive as it can be, we all win, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't matter if we're Republicans or Democrats. It doesn't matter if we're conservative or liberals. It doesn't matter if we are the religious zealot or we are the atheist. If we open our eyes and our hearts and remember the very simple lessons that we all learned on a playground, we're just people on a planet spinning through space. We do not hate unless someone teaches us to hate. if we reject those teachings and include everybody in our circle, our personal lives will be better. I promise you, your business will be better. Your individual honors and awards and recognition and salary will be better. And I get that final shot at that ex-wife of mine to tell her that, by God, I was right about that. Thank you very much, everybody. You've been an outstanding audience. Thank you very much. Thank you.